Integrity. Integrity is the quality of being honest and showing a consistent and uncompromising adherence to strong moral and ethical principles and values. In ethics, integrity is regarded as the honesty and truthfulness or earnestness of one's actions. Integrity can stand in opposition to hypocrisy. It regards internal consistency as a virtue and suggests that people who hold apparently conflicting values should account for the discrepancy or alter those values. A person is said to possess the virtue of integrity if the person's actions are based upon an internally consistent framework of principles. This is the best way that describes this man we are here to honor. Not only does this man carries the title of integrity, but he also carries the titles, son, brother, United States Air Force Airman, American Legionnaire, Vietnam Veteran, Veteran Grand Marshal, U.S. Air Force Police Investigator, Commander of an Honor Guard, and a loyal husband and loyal father. David Carrasco has held so many titles, and when anyone were to talk to him, he would talk to them as if they were one of his good friends. He has had such a rich life, and yet David is so humble. Please come with me and let me tell you who David Carrasco is and his extraordinary life. David Carrasco's story begins in Los Angeles, California when he was born on July 11, 1940. To the proud parents of Francisco and Maria Carrasco. As a child he was very rambunctious, running around with his 5 brothers and 4 sisters, driving his parents mad at how much energy he had. Growing up, David would have fun with his siblings, cousins, and neighborhood friends. But there were times his mind would be elsewhere. He would help around the house, doing his chores and sweeping up all the dusty floors. After he was done, David would use that extra energy for useful things like making model toys, or work on projects to pass the time. He was a fun-loving kid but also quiet. At times being around people was both a blessing and at odds. It wasn't because he was an introvert, it was because for him, trust was a big thing. He dealt with it by his trust in faith and his teachings of self-discipline taught by his parents. Along with having so much love for his family and friends, one thing that David really liked was the idea of organization, helping others. As a young man, David Carrasco learned the value of hard work and going home knowing a productive day is a well-spent day. From time to time as a young man, David would gaze upon the horizon and wonder what was behind those skies. He could never shake this feeling of a calling that was out there, and he needed to find it. He always wanted to do something important with his life. He just didn't know what. Later, David seriously looked deep into himself and thought about his future. His young and teenage years were good, but seeing how the world around him was changing, he thought the future would look dark and lifeless. Some of this was due to racism, which he would have to endure for most of his life, but also the little work in the town he lived in. So, when the time was right, in February 1959, David chose to enlist in the United States Air Force. He took the chance to follow his dreams, to catch what he was meant for. David had 4 beliefs in life. They all have to do with serving. Serving God, serving his family and friends, serving his country, and serving others and those who needs help. David didn't know his destiny that lay before him. He wanted to find out what the world had to offer. To find out, David knew joining the Air Force was one of the stepping stones he needed to reach his goals in life and fulfill that calling. In his mind, this would be a win-win situation because he could serve his country, and the Air Force would give him security and the chance to make a better future. As an enlistment man, David's MOS, or more commonly known as his job title, was a military policeman in the United States Air Force Security Forces, SF. This position came with a lot of responsibility and trust because David was fit to be promoted and gain responsibility such as being entrusted to safeguarding the B-47 and B-52 long-range bombers. The Boeing B-47 Stratojet American Long-Range, 6-engine, turbojet-powered strategic bomber designed to fly at high subsonic speed and at high altitude to avoid enemy interceptor aircraft. The primary mission of the B-47 was as a nuclear bomber capable of striking targets within the Soviet Union. The Boeing B-52 Stratofortress is a better version of the B-47, is an American long-range, subsonic, jet-powered strategic bomber. The B-52 was designed and built by Boeing, which has continued to provide support and upgrades and is still in service in 2024. It has been operated by the United States Air Force since the 1950s and NASA for over 40 years. Along with the sniper, it was considered one of the most feared weapons in the Vietnam War. Okay, so much for the history lesson on what David was guarding. Along with safeguarding these amazing aircraft, David's other duties included safeguarding the nuclear weapons housed deep inside the base where he was stationed. To give you an idea of the scope of this responsibility and daily life of this job, let me tell you why this job is so important. David Carrasco. From a young man, wet behind the ears low-rank base guardsman, to a ranking airman was given this task to go around the base and maintain a constant state of suspicious alertness to anything that moves, all because of the preciousness of what he is guarding. The base, the aircraft, his fellow personnel, and the nuclear weapons that could one day be used if ever needed. But one thing above all: to guard against anyone who wants to break in to hurt the United States. In July 1941, then the Empire of Japan decided to hit the United States because of the embargo of Japan. Japanese nationals who were loyal to the empire and the emperor would conduct clandestine missions in and around the bases of the peaceful U.S. fleet and army units stationed at Pearl Harbor. One man who was the main source of all Japanese intelligence used different types of gadgets and information gathering work and gave it all to the empire. And the results were devastating. Fast forward 20 years later, enter a young David Carrasco, walking the beat with a stern face, doing everything as a base policeman and base guard should. He may or may not have known that outside the base, the same thing could have happened. Clandestine missions of a military base, just like what happened in the past. And it was a time in the Vietnam era when David was performing his job. Not a popular time when David walked the grounds, and the military was just as unpopular as the war itself. David's base was definitely a target, especially if those bombers and nuclear weapons were to ever be used. It runs through your mind, if that were to ever happen, there was nothing that could be done to save themselves. For David and his fellow guards to perform this task, they must have had a lot on their minds and a lot of mettle to do their jobs. As time progressed, David was promoted from base guard and assigned to law enforcement. He spent 1 year in investigations. With David's honor, tenacity, and integrity, a sense of duty, and to want to help others, made him a great police officer. As in the old saying, wherever a person goes, there they are. A home away from home, meaning wherever a person is in the world, that is their home, so to speak. This saying also works just as much for family. So, in the fall of 1966, David Carrasco was assigned to a K-9 unit, where he would meet his family away from home. After some training, in December, he, his furry partner, his best friend, and other airmen and soldiers, all answered their country's call and was deployed to Vietnam. Once in the country, at Pleiku Air Base where David was stationed was not unlike the base where he was stationed at in the States. He still had to train, hydrate, and perform his job for his country. The only difference is that at this home away from home, there was more vegetation and critters running around, and some of the population have all the intentions of destroying the Americans in violent acts. With that all in mind, David and his fellow military personnel all had to be extra vigilant. It wasn't too long before the horrors of war made an appearance at his base. The U.S. Air Force Security Forces, along with David Carrasco, had a lot more to worry about guarding the base since they were all valuable targets. Yes, they would all go out and patrol, walk the beat, train, hydrate, and keep a watchful eye on all traffic, whether it be on foot or vehicles coming in and out of the base. This is because mostly all the personnel on the base had a price on their heads. With K-9 teams, the dangers were exponentially higher than most of the personnel on the base, including the pilots.
What made the dog handlers and their dogs such important targets? The Viet Cong forces feared all military working dogs. There were no front lines, no clearly defined battle zones, and no safe rear areas. So, the North Vietnamese targeted air bases, sometimes unobstructed, by bombing the bases with mortars and homemade bombs. To help stop this, the United States advisors to the South Vietnamese military recommended that a dog program be established. Sentry dogs would protect military bases. This program was to be known as Top Dog. It was an American and Vietnamese program in Vietnam to test sentry dogs for base security. The demands of the Vietnam War led to the creation of Operation Safe Side. This was an effort to bolster protection of air bases by training security police light infantry tactics and special weapons including K-9 teams. Dog teams were placed on the perimeter in front of machine gun towers and bunkers. The sentry dog teams were tasked as early warning for the bases. A constant barking alert was followed with a rapid response of reinforcements. Each military personnel would go to their respective posts and have as much weaponry and ammunition as they can carry. Dogs would alert handlers if they saw, heard, or smelled enemy forces approaching the bases. When on patrol, combat dogs and sentry dogs would alert handlers of hidden tunnels, bunkers, booby traps, and potential snipers. Service dogs also would alert certain scents that are airborne or scents that are already on the ground that are used as weapons. Combat dogs and sentry dog teams out on patrol and stationed on preventive perimeter posts would give initial alerts and warnings to enemy dangers almost simultaneously. A bounty was placed on the lives of dog teams. Interestingly, the bounty was higher on the dog than the handler. Captured Viet Cong regulars told of the fear and respect that they had for the combat and sentry dogs. This is what makes dog handler teams so special and most in danger. In the military and security services makes a great symbiotic relationship where humans and dogs are still in service today. Although the attacks went down, the VC would be bold enough to attack anyways, from time to time.
On one such attack, in late January 1968, during the Lunar New Year holiday, known as Tet, the North Vietnamese and Communist Viet Cong forces launched a coordinated attack against a number of American bases and other targets in South Vietnam. This action was called the Tet Offensive. The U.S. and South Vietnamese militaries sustained heavy losses before finally repelling the Communist assault. David Carrasco, along with his fellow dog teams, were being bombed during the offensive, and there was a likely chance that the base would be overrun, giving the enemy potential casualties, prisoners, and more weaponry. All base personnel, including the dog teams, were directed to the bomb shelters, scattered around the base. David, at this time, oversaw all dog handlers. He knew about the importance of the K-9 teams and the magnitude if they were captured or compromised. He exercised his judgment by ignoring an order to stay clear of the barrage and set out to make sure all his crew were safe. He put himself in harm's way to make sure each sentry dog team was safe. As it was, no sentry dog team were injured, and every team member was accounted for. David's actions of disobeying orders would eventually earn him a Bronze Star Award. This action saved a lot of lives. The attackers ultimately failed, but the cost was high. David lost his best friend, and he found a U.S. Army military policeman who he did not know dying next to him. His caring nature would have him sit next to this unknown comrade who was not Air Force but didn't matter. David would say comforting words as he was passing away, drawing his last breath, all the while holding his hand, and never knowing his name. David continued to secure the base and take care of his comrades until it was his time to go home. It was a bittersweet day because David was going back home but had to separate from his furry comrade also. David stayed in the Air Force, starting a family, and being transferred to different air bases in the United States from time to time. David's life was better, not being shot at, having a family, working as a senior investigator, respected for his actions in Vietnam, and respected for his time in service, and honored in ribbons, medals, and accommodations. Despite all that, being back home, David had a hard time dealing with PTSD. He tried to hide it and keep it behind the scenes of his life, but it was one of the factors that had him fight his own war back home.
Many times, the medical community tried to help but could not fully know what to make of it. Active military personnel and veterans all had to live through life with shell shock, or more commonly known as post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. PTSD was always known but was first officially recognized as a mental health condition in 1980. Only 5 years after, these symptoms have been described under different names in soldiers from many wars. However, Vietnam veterans with these symptoms were the first to have the term PTSD applied to them. Despite the passage of 50 years since the war, for some Vietnam veterans, PTSD remains a chronic reality of everyday life. Years passed, and David left the Air Force after 20 years of faithful service to this country. Now he had to find his own way in life. Just like all who served in all the branches of the military, male and female alike since the last 247 years. David worked different jobs, trying to find what would suit him. Construction work, mechanic, and a truck driver for 5 years. He had a hard time dealing with life, but he never gave up and always kept his composure and his military posture. So, he decided to go back to what he knew. Going back into the law enforcement field and creating Carrasco Investigation Service, CIS. He would not be a policeman on the streets, but a private investigator and a bounty hunter. David Carrasco performed his job as if he was still in uniform. Being called to do jobs, going over there, investigating over here, it was all business for him. David was tough, determined, professional, and very good at his job. David was described as stern by the book, and yet still a gentleman. He was good at this job, because it was similar in the Air Force. But it was not to last. It really didn't satisfy his need to end his war with PTSD.
Long ago David joined the American Legion. In it he would converse with other veterans about their experiences in deployments and battle. He liked talking to other veterans than talking to doctors. It was something positive, but it wasn't quite right of what he was searching for either. David always said, "There is an old military saying, I left Vietnam, but Vietnam never left me. I still have the need to serve because the US Air Force gave me that discipline." At the post he volunteered for the Color Guard unit. His duties would provide full military honors in various events and give to other veteran organizations. Doing this kind of work caught David's sensibility of not only serving again, but to serve in a positive way. He was hooked. In 1989, David took over the honor guard he was part of. It was disbanding, and he asked if he could save and run it. His wish was granted, and he filled it with fellow veterans and civilians volunteering their time. His ideals of serving would once again be on display. To serve God and country. Veterans and service providers. Civilian communities. To his state and country and his fellow people. Those who were members of this new honor guard also followed the same ideals. When David first left home searching for a better future, he never dreamed he would be using a non-profit entity to better the lives of others and himself. This is where he truly started to mend his broken heart with the ghosts of his past. Serving has always been his calling. So, he continued to serve his state and nation as a volunteer in different ways. He served in key positions within the American Legion, earning him Legionnaire of the Year in 2013 and 2018.
In later years, David had the idea to take another step in his life of service. This in part was because the help of a woman he met, named Cherokee Mangus. Vel Cherokee Mangus, a resident of Gilbert, Arizona, was an artist, musician and vocalist, poet, Native American activist, a caretaker on an old movie set near Apache Junction, Arizona, which once hosted Ronald Reagan, Jason Robards, Kenny Rogers, Elvis Presley, Audie Murphy, and many other legendary stars. She spearheaded an effort to create an Apacheland Historical Society and Museum devoted to the history of this movie set ranch east of Apache Junction in the heart of Gold Canyon. Originally, she started her historical society out of the Adobe Meeting Hall in Gold Canyon. Cherokee also had a massive desire to preserve history, especially with Native American history and the Apache way of life through the Southwest. One of her proudest accomplishments was being named to the Rosa Parks Wall of Tolerance for her work at the Ryman Theater in Nashville for the Native American Dance Theater. There was nothing but good in Cherokee's heart for others. She liked to help others, more so when they are in pain. She was no stranger to the military life, and one day she and David would meet. Although she was never as much pain as David, they shared a common bond, the Apache ancestry and protecting the Apache land and preserving their memories. David was proud and devoted to his beliefs as an American patriot and his Apache heritage. He was a direct descendant of the Apache leader, Geronimo. They also had another bond with the respect for the American Armed Forces and respect for its veterans. One of Cherokee's original quotes was, "You have to accept what life throws at you and shape it into a work of art." So, on that thinking, in many conversations, David said he would really like to serve his country, the people, and his fellow veterans by putting together an honor guard of his own at the American Legion Post No. 1. David had standards for this unit. He wanted this honor guard to be different than all the others. David had much respect for United States military members and veterans, but he noticed just about everyone would bring respect for those who are still alive and forgot those who are hardly mentioned in the less popular wars and actions. Both Cherokee Mangus and David Carrasco agreed that they would form the Prisoners of War, Missing in Action, and Killed in Action, POW, MIA, KIA, Honor Guard, with the motto, no face, no voice, or presence. This new unit has a military-style honor guard with members from different backgrounds of United States military branches and theater of operations, and is welcoming of civilians who have no military training but love America, their fellow Americans, and wanting to help in some ways. At first everything was confused and jumbled, just like everything new can be. There were no flags or uniforms. After getting all their ducks in a row, in September 2008, David's honor guard went from a gaggle to an official veterans service organization. All members wore camouflage clothing because of David's personal experiences in Vietnam. His intention was to perform every function that any other honor guard would do, save one. He was happy to show respect to those veterans who are still alive, to march with all the pomp and circumstances in the bigger military remembrance ceremonies. But he was a giant advocate to perform honors that were left out of the American public memories and forgotten. Since 1775 to 2014, the United States has fought 108 military wars, operations, police actions, and conflicts. Since the Revolutionary War, over 1.3 million American service members have died in war and non-combat situations, twice that number for injuries. Only a handful of those events are recognized. David wanted to show respect for every one of those American service members and all those wars and events of the past. His belief was that they are all not forgotten. David wanted to support the families who have difficulty and never having closure with the loss of a loved one in military action. He also saw it was his personal way of dealing with his own PTSD by trying to help others with theirs. This honor guard is the only known unit to have both military veterans and non-military civilians working in tandem together. Although David's new unit is unusual, it is very respected because it has all the sincerity as a professional honor guard and is seen as kindred. For the past 19 years, the honor guard has participated in many military events, honor ceremonies, and performs all functions. No ceremony was too big or small. The POW, MIA, KIA Honor Guard has rendered full military honors at funerals and is part of many events and activities, including winning multiple awards in different categories of veteran events. David Carrasco's years of devoted service to numerous military, veteran, and nonprofit organizations gave him the chance to have another title. He has earned the unique distinction as a Veterans Community Grand Marshal at the Phoenix Veterans Day Parade on November 11, 2022. Deep down, David must have thought to himself that forming the honor guard was his way of being apologetic and penitent for coming home alive while so many never did. In his mind, David's honor guard was a way to say to all veterans, "Welcome home."
Thank you for viewing the Remembrance video of David Carrasco. As we end, I would like to show a great man who had an extraordinary life. He had inner pains and used those pains to construct something positive. Those who know him personally would agree with his character behind the scenes. So finally, please let me show you the man behind the greatness. We end with one of David's great friend and friend to the POW, MIA, KIA Honor Guard, Jeff Seeners, way back home.
One day I dreamt I woke up in a peaceful paradise. People like in the heat of night. Tear down these walls in my way. There's a new day dawning in a world that's loving. Open up before it's too late. Help me find my way back home. Won't you find